What is a man's life worth when he dares defy a king? That unspoken question echoed across Edward I's realm in 1305, for William Wallace, known as Williams le Wallace in official records. The answer was not negotiation, but destruction. Wallace rose to prominence during Scotland's uprising against English rule. On September 11, 1297, at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he and Andrew Murray achieved a landmark victory. But it was no reckless charge. Wallace and Murray held back until half the English army had crossed the narrow bridge, then launched a devastating assault, trapping their enemy between the river and rising ground. This tactical brilliance turned terrain into a weapon. Murray, however, died shortly after from wounds sustained in battle, leaving Wallace as the sole guardian of Scotland. The triumph was brief. In July 1298, Edward I personally led an army to face Wallace at the Battle of Falkirk. There, Wallace's forces collapsed not merely from miscalculation, but because Scottish cavalry deserted and English longbowmen tore through the tightly packed schiltrons of Scottish infantry. It was a tactical disaster. After Falkirk, Wallace resigned as guardian. Rather than turning to guerrilla warfare in the Highlands, he embarked on a diplomatic mission to France c. 1299 to 1303, seeking international support for Scotland's cause. By 1305, Wallace returned, still a symbol of resistance, but betrayal awaited him. Sir John de Menteith, a Scottish knight loyal to Edward, captured Wallace near Glasgow. English accounts describe this as treachery, and he was taken to London in chains. On August 23, 1305, William Wallace, filthy, chained, and worn from years of warfare, was brought before the royal court at Westminster Hall. The space, vast and echoing, had witnessed many trials, but this was not about justice. It was about condemnation. Wallace was charged with treason against King Edward I, as well as robbery, murder, and inciting war, but he refused to acknowledge the charge of treason. His words, paraphrased in chronicles, reveal his defiance. He had never sworn allegiance to Edward and therefore could not be a traitor. To the English, this was irrelevant. Treason was not about oaths, but about defiance. Edward I had no patience for legal niceties. The trial lasted only a brief time. There were no advocates for the defense, no witnesses, and no appeals. The sentence was predetermined. He was condemned to a brutal punishment designed to humiliate and destroy both body and legacy. This gruesome sequence was not just an execution, it was a deliberate statement of power. The court sought to extinguish Wallace's life, and his legacy through punishment meant to leave a lasting message. Wallace was imprisoned in the Tower of London, where he awaited his execution. The Tower was a grim symbol of royal authority. Held in chains, likely in the Salt Tower, Wallace endured humiliation and likely abuse. Food would have been minimal and cleanliness non-existent. No record remains of his final thoughts. What is known is that he faced his final days without any show of remorse. To the last, he saw himself not as a criminal, but as a man who had fought for his country's freedom. At dawn on August 23, 1305, the streets of London stirred for a public execution unlike any other. This was not merely punishment, it was theater. William Wallace, the most defiant enemy Edward I had faced, was to die in the most agonizing and dishonorable way English law could devise. The method was no secret. Wallace was first stripped and tied to a hurdle, a crude wooden frame, then dragged by horse from the Tower of London to Smithfield. This journey of nearly 2 miles was brutal by design. Spectators jeered, children threw refuse. He was battered by the road, exposed to the filth and indignity that marked a traitor's final procession. By midday, he reached Smithfield, a field known for executions and public punishments. A scaffold had been prepared, complete with ropes, hooks, and knives. There would be no swift death. The sentence was carried out exactly as written in royal decree. First, Wallace was hanged by the neck not until death, but until he hovered on the edge of unconsciousness. His body convulsed as air was cut off, but he was cut down before death could claim him. The executioner's goal was not efficiency, it was spectacle. Next came a phase of punishment intended to inflict maximum suffering. According to chroniclers like Walter of Gisborough, Wallace endured one of the harshest penalties under English law, his agony drawn out deliberately. Only then was he beheaded, finally released from his suffering. But even in death, Wallace's body was not granted peace. His remains were divided and sent across the kingdom as a warning to others. The purpose was unmistakable, to crush not only Wallace, but the very idea of Scottish rebellion. His head was preserved and placed atop London Bridge, greeting all who entered the city. It stood as a symbol of conquest, emblematic of Edward I's desire to erase Wallace's rebellion from both land and memory. His body was divided, with each section sent to different cities in northern England and southern Scotland, where his name continued to stir unrest. Some traditions claimed possession of Wallace's remains, with whispers of secret burials surfacing over time. In Cambuskenneth Abbey near Stirling, it was said that monks retrieved one of his quarters for quiet Christian interment. Whether these accounts hold fact or folklore, they speak to a legacy that defied destruction. Wallace was divided limb from limb and his remains disposed of in several parts of the country to strike fear in others. There was no recorded rite, no monument, no final resting place known with certainty, only fragments of bone and silence. Yet, the silence didn't last. Wallace's death reverberated through Scotland. Rather than extinguish resistance, the Crown's cruelty deepened it. Within years, Scotland would rise again, not forgetting Wallace, but invoking him. Though scattered in life's final hour, his memory resisted conquest. What the axe tried to erase, the people preserved. His ordeal revealed how empires use fear as a tool to suppress resistance, yet, even in defeat, his broken body gave rise to a legend that outlived chains. His death reshaped allegiances, inspired Bruce, and reminds us that no force can truly silence an idea. Wallace's legacy invites us to reflect. How far should conscience bend before authority? Consider this. Which moment capture, judgment, or punishment best reflects the mindset of power today? Share your thoughts below. It is in truth for freedom alone, which no man of worth forsakes but with his life.